Welcome to Civics in a Year, the podcast that makes civic literacy fast, accessible, and surprisingly engaging. In just 10 minutes an episode, we'll tackle one of 250 essential questions about American democracy, how it works, why it matters, and what it means for you. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone who wants to better understand your country and your rights, you're in the right place. Civics in a Year is powered by the Civic Literacy Curriculum from the Center for American Civics and is produced in partnership with the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University. Welcome to the final episode of Civics in a Year. I have to admit, I never imagined how emotional it would feel to say those words. A little over a year ago, I was given what seemed like an impossible challenge: create 250 podcast episodes to commemorate America's 250th anniversary. I, of course, said yes because I believed in the idea, but I didn't realize that somewhere along the way, this project would become something much more personal for me. This has been my love letter to America. Not because America is perfect. In fact, one of the greatest gifts of this journey has been the opportunity to explore our nation's triumphs alongside of its failures, its high ideals alongside its deepest contradictions. Week after week, I was reminded that loving your country does not mean ignoring its flaws. It means caring enough to understand them and believing that each generation has a responsibility to move us closer to the ideals that we claim as our own. Over the past year, I've got to have conversations with some of the country's leading historians, authors, educators, journalists, museum professionals, public servants, and civic leaders. I've learned something from every single one of them. They've challenged me, inspired me, and reminded me that the story of America is far more complicated and far more hopeful than we often give it credit for. And as I thought about how to end this series, I kept coming back to one question. Not necessarily what happened 250 years ago, but more of what does the Declaration of Independence mean 250 years later? So instead of ending with one final interview, I wanted to end with a conversation across generations. You'll first hear from Arizona State University's President Michael Crow, whose leadership has made civic education a cornerstone of the university's mission. After that, you'll hear from Dr. Paul Carrese, Director of the Center for American Civics and the founding director of the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University, whose work has helped shape how we think about the American founding and constitutional democracy. And my favorite part, you're going to hear from a group of remarkable high school students who joined us this summer for Arizona State University's Civic Leadership Institute. I really love that these voices are appearing side by side. Because democracy is not just sustained by experts alone. It is sustained when each generation wrestles with the same enduring questions, learn from those who came before, and adds its own perspective to the American story. The Declaration of Independence belongs just as much to the students imagining America's future as it does to the scholars who spent decades studying its past. So I asked them all the same question. What does the Declaration of Independence mean 250 years later? Their answers were thoughtful, they're honest, and sometimes they're hopeful. Sometimes they're challenging. Together, they remind us that the Declaration isn't simply a document that we preserve behind glass. It's an invitation to continue the work of self-government, to expand liberty, and to keep asking what it means to build a nation dedicated to the proposition that we are all created equal. But before we begin, I genuinely want to thank you, the listeners. Whether you've listened to one episode or all 250, thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for believing that history matters, that civic knowledge matters, and that understanding our past helps us shape a better future. This part of the series might be ending, but the American story never does.
For me, the 250 years tells us that we're in the very early stages. We're maybe in the second inning of a 9-inning game that's going to go at least 4 or 5 extra innings, one can only hope. And like baseball, there's no clock. So it means there's not a time on this thing. And so what I mean by we're in the second inning, in the warm up, we had to come up with the whole idea of the Declaration, the preamble, as some people call it, the greatest sentence ever written, where it lays out the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, among others. It lays out this whole notion that all people are created equally. And so that's sort of the setup of the game. Then the Declaration occurs, and then the game starts. And in the first inning, we have taken on first overthrowing the British in what ended up being a pretty dramatic civil war. It was more than a revolution. It was more of a civil war. We had to work our way through fighting the British a second time, who tried to take us over in 1812. Then, of course, we had the lingering unresolved question that there was no truth to the statement that all people were created equal, because in the way that the country was designed, they weren't. Women couldn't vote. Blacks were still held in slavery, indentured servitude, everything that you can possibly imagine, and unequal justice. And so in the first inning, we had to get all the way to now, or just about now, by trying to move towards the fuller realization of the goal that the Declaration identified, this notion of governance by the people, all people being equal, and everyone being granted unalienable rights. And now in the second inning, we've been trying to find out how to make that work, with at least statements of equality being justifiably and legally enforced. The notion of pursuit of unalienable rights is still being worked out, because we have this big thing about resources and money and access to things. And so the way I see this 250 years into this is that now we have a very clear picture about how to get through the second inning. That is, what do we have to do in the second inning to continue to strive towards this goal? I've outlined a number of things. So we need to add to the unalienable rights, because even in the Declaration it says, among others. So if you go back into the philosophical literature and you see what some of the other rights were, well, one of them was learning. And so one of the things that we focused on here at ASU is the design of a new kind of university, which is one built on who we include versus who we exclude and how they succeed. One built on doing research that's built around the public and the public's goals and the people's goals. And the third part of what we call our charter is taking responsibility for the outcomes of our society. So of the schools, of the hospitals, of the economy, not exclusive responsibility, but responsibility in the sense that we're not just in this for ourselves. And so here in the second inning, what we're trying to do is to build better institutions for the democracy. Now, once you build these better institutions, and we've taken a lot of steps towards that with our model here at ASU, well, then they have to run for a while. Can we really reach all learners? Can we really help a person who didn't finish college? Can we help a person who didn't finish high school? Can we help all people to find some way to take this right to learn and then move themselves forward to being, unbelievably powerful in the democracy? So the most important point at 250 years is, one, to take a very long-term view, two, to not have a clock, three, to realize that we are at best in the second inning of this long baseball game. It's going to be a long time before we figure out how to educate everyone. It's going to be a long time before we figure out how we're going to make certain that people really have equality. And equality doesn't mean everyone's the same. It means everyone has the same chance. And so, we're working towards all of those things. And so for me, this is a marker. 250 years seems like a long time, but it's not. My father's family came here in the 17th century to Maryland, to the eastern shore of Maryland. And then, that's like yesterday, basically. I mean, if you think about it, I know their names all the way back to the 1640s. I know the names of the people that came from England. And I knew my great-grandfather, both my great-grandfathers, both from Missouri. on my father's side, I actually knew them, and they were born 140 plus years ago. And so it's just weird that they then knew people that were born in the 1810s and the 1800s, like 1808, 1809. They knew people born in those years. And that's just weird to me that I knew people who were alive when Abraham Lincoln was alive. And so what it means is that it's just the flash of a flash of a light. And so 250 years also means that we've got 250 years of unbelievable sacrifice to defend the democracy, to advance the democracy, to help make it work, of the civil rights movement, all the other things that have gone on to help make things move in good directions. And so we have to be thankful for all of that. And we have to find ways to build on that.
As we celebrate the 250th birthday of America, the semi-quincentennial after 1776 and the Declaration of Independence, I put a challenge to all American citizens and aspiring citizens to read the Declaration of Independence carefully, find some place to discuss it with other people, and view it as an invitation and a challenge. So take seriously the whole document. It's complicated. The opening statements of universal principle that we are one people because in the course of human events, one people needing to do what we're about to do, and stating the universal principles, the laws of nature and nature's God, the other references to a divinity, and then the list of grievances, and then the final paragraph. All of that is an invitation and a challenge to be a self-governing citizen, along with the 56 signers and everybody else, right? Washington's not there at the Second Continental Congress because he's already been sent off to battle, right? He certainly would have been a signer. It's an invitation, a challenge, and I'll emphasize the last sentence. To the extent that any of us read and take seriously the Declaration anymore, we get lost in a way in those first two paragraphs. They're so extraordinary, and there's so much there. Universal principles, self-evident truths, all created equal, etc. We forget the extraordinary claim made in the closing, as if it's sort of just a throwaway dramatic line, right? So the fourth and final reference to a divinity, and then this closing pledge. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So to celebrate the 250th of America, I challenge you to take that as a personal challenge for you. It's a matter of sacred honor that you take seriously the possibility of being an American citizen or being an American citizen and living up to it. It's an invitation and a challenge, right? The pursuit of happiness means the sacred honor of being a self-governing citizen, right? We forget in the second paragraph, there's not only a right to rebel against a government that's tyrannical, violating our equal natural rights. It's a duty, right? So a duty, a happiness, a sacred honor to be self-governing. And then as you carefully read the rest of the Declaration, you can see all of the arguments why and all of the principles invoked and the beginning of this sort of the roadmap for America moving forward. So I think especially remembering that final sentence and thinking of it as integral to the argument of independence and the meaning of independence helps you to appreciate the document as a whole and appreciate America, the achievement, the ongoing achievement and experiment of America as a whole.
Hi, my name is Grace. I'm 15, and I think that the Declaration, 250 years later, is significant because in a world where we have so much outward influence from social media and the news and all these other sources, the Declaration is there to remind our leaders that this country was built on virtue, and with all the outward noise, that there is a solid place for for morals to still stand.
My name is Grace, and I'm 17. The Declaration today, I feel like, has been lost to like what a bunch of people have during these like modern times. And while like it's lost, there are like a majority trying to recover what being like independent means nowadays, and who does that apply to. And while it is sad that it has been lost, seeing that like there's a renewal of like interest in historical education and knowing where your origins are or where the declaration and the laws come from, I feel like is a foundation to be like living here in America.
My name's Harrison. I'm just turned 14, and to me, I think that the Declaration is a writing that defines that we are born with natural rights that can't be taken away, and that it's the government's job to protect us.
My name is Gabriel Valdez, and I'm 15 years old, and what the Declaration means to me 250 years later is the same thing that it would have meant to me if I lived 250 years ago. The same values in the Constitution outlined still stand today.
Hello, this is Justin. I am 17. And what does the Declaration of Independence mean 250 years later? Well, in a current state of society where, as it always has been in the United States, inequality is observable, I would take a stance on what it means in a current society, similar to a stance that would be taken by Abraham Lincoln or Frederick Douglass or perhaps Martin Luther King, that the fundamental principles of the Declaration of Independence, specifically being all men are created equal, are very instated in our Constitution and our law, even if to the full extent has not been properly executed. So, such as the No Kings rally, we can see, or at least I did on the news, people holding up constitutions, people holding up signs that say all men are created equal, that say we the people. They are pointing out injustice and justifying their anger with the Constitution, with the Declaration of Independence. And I think that is a really beautiful thing that we have carried on since the beginning of this country and 250 years later.
My name's Evelyn, and I'm 16 years old. And the Declaration of Independence 250 years later, I think often in a very popular misconception is that it really only applied in that time or in that specific case, having to separate from England and from King George. But I think with all the advances of our country and also just the direction that we're going in, even though it's a very different time, I think the values outlined by the Declaration of Independence matter now more than ever because we have so many more things that are, I guess, controversial about it or ways in which it can be interpreted. But I think sticking to the way that the original values were meant to be interpreted by the Founding Fathers is more important now than it ever has been before.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm 15 years old, and the Declaration 250 years later means that we still have a baseline for things that we need to think about in our government, even when we're in such different times.
My name is Clara. I'm 14 years old. I think the Declaration 250 years later really just shows how much it has evolved to the current situation of the United States. For example, the meaning of the statement in the preamble, all men, is different today, and even like after the whole civil rights movement is different than when it was created.
My name's Mari, I'm 15, and in order to avoid the U.S. from becoming tyrannical, it's still important to keep in mind that the government derives its power from the consent of the governed and can be abolished when needed, meaning when it becomes destructive to our rights.
My name is Julia, and I'm 14 years old. I believe that after 250 years, the Declaration of Independence represents the hardships that our founding fathers had to go through and the struggles they faced while trying to gain their freedom and independence from Great Britain. We can learn from their hardships to improve our lives through their perseverance and keeping connection with our nation's history and life.
Hi, I'm Felix. I'm 14 years old. So what the Declaration means to me 250 years later is that when it was first being drafted, the drafters were taking into consideration a higher power, and now 250 years later, that higher power is still there, and we're able to exercise a freedom of religion thanks to the Constitution, which also takes into consideration those ideas from the Declaration. So for the Declaration to still be relevant 250 years later means that it really was thought out and well drafted, and all of the vocabulary and wording that was used really was meant to drive home a point for the people that were in rebellion.
My name's Matthew, and I'm 14 years old. What the Declaration means to me is not just a statement, not just America declaring its independence from Britain, but a statement of the founding ideals of our nation and just the sheer importance. But also it's very important how we are breaking away from Britain and standing up to them because they aren't securing our natural rights.
My name is Mia, and I'm 17 years old. The Declaration of Independence 250 years later means that for the first time, a group of settlers in a colony claimed independence from a major world power in a major power struggle. And 250 years later, this Declaration of Independence symbolizes the fact that without the consent of the governed, a government no longer has the power over its people because the government is not protecting the rights of its people correctly. And even after 1776, the Declaration of Independence has served as inspiration for countless revolutions across the world, including the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Latin American revolutions, and even the Vietnam revolutions.
Hi, my name's Logan, and I'm 15. To me, the Declaration of Independence shows persistence and struggles the colonists went through to fight for what they believed was important at the time. But today, 250 years later, the Declaration has fallen in power to where the consent of the governed is being infringed upon by a tyrannical administration that has no care for the due process and the stripping of the natural rights that the colonists fought so hard to achieve. We went from a society where we rioted over taxes on our tea to a society that pays taxes on our taxes and don't bat an eye. The Declaration has changed so much over the past 250 years and will continue to, but not for the better.
Hello, my name's Aubrey. I'm 17 years old, and the Declaration of Independence 250 years later shows the breaking point of what us as the governed and especially as American citizens should endure from our government. It serves as an example and courage to address elements of our government that don't necessarily serve us and are right and just. The Declaration of Independence serves as an inspiration to what can be done.
My name is Noah, and I'm 15. The Declaration means to me, and I believe a majority of Americans, that there is an internal promise that regardless of race, religion, or any other form, are equal by birth. The nature of this means that just as Lincoln at Gettysburg, that we struggle to live up to this almost impossible ideal. Therefore, 250 years later, I look between a massive success of movements that have brought this internal promise closer to fruition, but still, I look at the work we have to do and understand that we must not be idle in the work of peace, cannot stand idly by the suppression of our neighbors, and must work tirelessly to ensure the 250 years of progression and interpretation are not in vain.
As we close this chapter, I'll leave you with one final thought. The Declaration of Independence wasn't the end of the American story. It was the beginning of an ongoing experiment, one that every generation inherits and every generation helps shape. For the past year, I have had the privilege of learning alongside with you. Thank you for listening, for being curious, and for believing that history and civics still matter. America's next 250 years will not be written by the people we read about in history books. It's going to be written by us. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep learning. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Civics in a Year. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who cares about a constitutional republic as much as you do. For more episodes, resources, and updates, follow us on social media or visit us at civics.asu.edu. Make sure to check out the show notes for any relevant links. Special thanks to the United States Marine Band for their performance of the Stars and Stripes Forever. Let's keep building a stronger constitutional republic, one episode at a time.